On the next leg of our top-end trip, we're driving down the Arnhem Highway to Kakadu. We cross the Mary River, where on a previous trip we took a boat ride and were fortunate in seeing the secretive great billed heron. Largest of the Australian herons, shy and solitary, it stalks stealthily along large mangrove-lined rivers of northern coastal Australia, foraging for various aquatic animals with its huge dagger-like bill and taking care to stay in cover. Breeding pairs hold a foraging territory, and the mating call, rarely heard, is a loud roar. Entering the South Alligator section of Kakadu, we stop at Mamakala wetlands, where a bird hide overlooks the vast lagoon, an important area for birds as other water sources dry out. The overwhelming clamour of a large camp of plumed whistling duck drowns other sounds. These are grazing ducks, feeding on land rather than in the water, and flocks are often heard in the dark as they move out at night to graze on surrounding grasslands. Mated pairs stay together for long periods, breeding in the wet season and sharing in the care of the young. The larger birds among them are magpie geese. A couple of marsh sandpipers, sometimes called little greenshank because of the close physical resemblance, are feeding beside a royal spoonbill. The sandpipers are migrants from Eurasia, where they breed. The familiar woolly wagtail turns up all over mainland Australia, unlike Australian pratincoal, which prefers arid plains with a nearby water source because it needs to drink often, as it doesn't seek shade in hot weather but relies on panting. We're heading to Kowinda, in the yellow water region of Kakadu, where we'll be staying for a couple of nights, and pass a family of large, stately brolgas, one of only 2 Australian cranes, the other being Sarah's crane. They're famous for their courtship dancing display and mate for life, nesting in the middle of wetlands. Yellow water billabong is a wonderful wetland with myriad bird species and other wildlife. This female darter cools down using gular fluttering, a combination of rapid open-mouth breathing and quick vibration of moist throat membranes that causes evaporation. Excess heat leaves the bird's body with each exhalation. A pair of green pygmy geese, the female giving good views of the distinctive scribbly bark patterning. White-throated honeyeater favours riparian habitats and is an acrobatic foliage gleaner. Northern fantail doesn't constantly flick about and fan its tail like other members of its family. Instead it perches, then swoops, more like a flycatcher. Our walk along the river has taken us right underneath the perch of white-bellied sea eagle, a coastal bird which ranges inland on large waterways and looks magnificent in flight. Next morning we're up early for a dawn cruise on yellow water, a highlight of any trip to Kakadu. Yellow water comprises a series of billabongs surrounded by treeless floodplains and extensive woodland at the confluence of Jim Jim Creek and the South Alligator River. The only way to penetrate this magnificent protected habitat is by boat, and a slow cruise as the sun rises offers wonderful opportunities to observe wildlife. There's a healthy population of estuarine crocodiles, salties, which were nearly extinct before becoming a protected species in 1971. The largest reptiles in the world, and the oldest, existing in the age of the dinosaurs, they can weigh up to 1,000 kilos and have the strongest bite of any animal, making them fearsome predators. Yet there are thousands of potential prey along the banks, seemingly unperturbed by their proximity. Another daytime camp of plumed whistling duck and one Rajah shelduck. The sun has risen, and now the light is good for spotting animals on the floodplains. Cattle egrets and wild horses display a mutually beneficial arrangement. The horses stir up the insects, and any that settle on their backs are picked off by the birds. But there are always reminders of the less benign interdependence of this complex ecosystem. Even so, predators wouldn't have an easy time if all potential prey was as feisty as the indomitable willy wagtail. Stick to your own territory. We're approaching a fairly recently built nest of black-necked stork, formerly known as Jabaru. These majestic birds build vast nests in the crowns of trees, with a circumferential view adding to it each year. Both parents feed the young by regurgitating food onto the floor of the nest. On particularly hot days, they deluge the chicks with a beakful of water. On a previous visit, we saw a much larger, older nest. Lotus lilies create a liminal habitat exploited by comb-crested jacana, using the longest feet of any bird species to walk on the water. The female is polyandrous, and the male incubates the eggs and cares for the young. This dad and his 3 precocial chicks are out for a stroll, but he's seen us coming and is becoming concerned. He has the ability to gather the chicks under his wings, tuck them up and carry them to safety. 2 have got the message, and now there is a bird with 6 legs and the occasional tiny extra head. Unfortunately, there is always one in every family who will go wandering off, and Dad is getting alarmed, wanting to move to a safer spot and trying to keep sight of the boat and his wayward chick at the same time. He heads to safer ground where he waits and patiently tries to coax his inattentive offspring into the bosom of the family. This is where I want you. At last, Junior has got the message and hopped on board. Now Dad can relax and attend to his own grooming. Nankeen night heron spends much of its time stalking along the water's edge, staring into the water for fish. It has a distinctively hunched appearance and 2 white plumes on its nape which often twine together. Maybe the most beautiful of Australia's kingfishers, the Asia, is a dazzling iridescent violet blue in the sunlight, with rufous underparts, bright red feet and large white fake eye spots which may help protect its eyes while hunting. An adult eagle is perched on its hunting perch beside the water, which is handy to its huge stick nest. Another vivid blue jewel by the waterside, the forest kingfisher is slightly larger than the Asia, with white underparts. The beauty of this waterland is overwhelming, but as we head back, we're accompanied by the sinuous reminder of its ever-present dangers. East of Yellowwater is Norlangi, an extensive sandstone rock escarpment with pockets of monsoon rainforest and spectacular ancient Aboriginal rock paintings. The bird we would most like to find here is the rare banded fruit dove. On a previous trip, the fig trees weren't fruiting, so fingers crossed this time. An unmistakable and often monotonously continuous call, brush cuckoo is looking for a mate. The Bang Bang Shelter is a breathtaking art gallery. Aboriginals have lived continuously in this country for over 50,000 years, and these vivid paintings from many different eras depict ancestral figures from Dreamtime stories, as well as animals and birds. We're always scanning upwards for the endemic fruit dove, but, typical of birding surprises, the next bird we see is pecking for seeds on the ground rather than feeding in the trees. The terrestrial Pacific emerald dove, a shy, compact forest pigeon with iridescent green wings and a bright red beak. But we're not giving up on that fruit dove. There's a pitter calling, but we're still looking upwards, and we're rewarded with a glimpse of the sandstone race of helmeted friarbird. Even better, white-lined honeyeater, a slender grey-brown honeyeater with a blue eye, restricted to ravines filled with broad-leaved scrub and pockets of monsoon forest on the Arnhem Land Plateau. Ah, here's the bird we've been hearing, a flash of blue, rainbow pitter, the only endemic Australian pitter. Excitement. A rare daytime sighting of black wallaroo. Generally nocturnal, solitary and shy, this species is confined to the steep, rocky sandstone escarpment of Western Arnhem Land. Smallest and most distinctive of the wallaroos, thick-set and muscular. The females are grey. As they're usually nocturnal feeders, and he's aware of us, this is a special moment. Greg has heard a flutter of wings above. At last we've spotted the large arboreal fruit dove with the most restricted range of any Australian pigeon, banded fruit dove. Thank goodness for the fruiting fig. It's a magnificent bird, well worth a crick in the neck. Its name comes from the broad black band looping across the lower breast, then grading to grey. It descends to the ground rarely, only to drink at soaks where water seeps from the sandstone, and is usually seen alone or in pairs, flying along a cliff edge. We've waited a long time to film this bird, complete satisfaction. Now we can relax and take our time to complete the climb up the escarpment, enjoying the imposing and colourful rock formations, plants and animals on the way. And lastly, the spectacular view from the top. Delighted to have found our main target bird as well as some diverting surprises, we're visiting the adjacent Nawalanja lookout where we find blue-winged kookaburra, close relative of the laughing kookaburra of the south, seen here for comparison. The blue-winged prefers a wetter habitat, but the two species have very similar feeding, mating and nesting habits and happily coexist where their ranges meet. Soaring overhead, probably checking out the nearby Anbangbang billabong, is black-breasted buzzard, a sparse inhabitant of inland plains and tropical savanna, especially along watercourses. We visited this spot on a previous trip, so we know a 300-metre climb up a moderately steep slope, even in the heat, is well worth it for the view alone, as well as for any birds we may see. From the top there is a glorious vista over some of the 20,000 square kilometres of Kakadu. We weren't able to glimpse another of the sandstone specialists, Sandstone Shrike-thrush, though we'd had great views on our last visit. In an otherwise tree-living group of birds, it has thoroughly exploited its niche, foraging on the rocks, hiding in the caverns, singing from lofty vantage points and nesting on rock ledges. On the way home, we check the roadside carefully, as this is the time when the terrestrial pigeons prefer to feed, and we're lucky enough to see Partridge pigeon, the top-end race with red facial skin. They need to drink daily and so stay near water sources. The clatter of wings on takeoff, like a partridge, gives them their name. A fabulous day, ending with a magical tropical sunset. Next morning, we're driving north of the Arnhem Highway to another interesting area adjacent to the East Alligator River. It features tiered sandstone outliers, which are perfect habitat for another bird found only in the top end and restricted to this particular habitat, Chestnut-quilled Rock Pigeon. The Bardagilly Walk takes us past these impressive sandstone cliffs near an adjacent water source where the pigeons live in pairs and small parties, seldom venturing far from the base, and then only to feed or drink in the early morning or evening. It's best to keep still and wait. They're too difficult to find among the crevices in the rocks. This has paid off. We can even catch a thin glimpse of the large chestnut patch in their primaries from which their name derives, which is hard to see except in flight. With their short legs, drooping wings and tails, they have a dumpy appearance, but are in fact very agile and can disappear quickly into the cliffs, skimming over rocks and running on landing. They eat the seeds of a variety of herbs and grasses and perch only in rocks, never trees. On our way back to the highway, we're passing a billabong with native water birds, which they are unfortunately having to share with one of Australia's most seriously destructive pests, feral pig. An estimated 23 million of these animals are causing huge damage across the top end wherever there is water. We've spotted a flock of majestic red-tailed black cockatoos coming into land in a burnt area. We've often found them in these areas, which they seem to find attractive. Maybe fire has burst open some of the hard seed pods of the eucalypts, casuarinas and banksias, which make up the bulk of their diet, and which they usually have to tear open with their robust beaks. The females have a spotted head and striped orange tail, while the males are a glossy black with bright red tail panels. Phew, it's been an extremely hot but very exciting morning, and now we have to drive to Mary River Roadhouse near the south entrance to Kakadu, where we'll be spending the next couple of nights. And after days of looking everywhere for the Rosella of the top end, northern Rosella, here they are in the campground, a glorious sight. We'd thought Rosellas would be easy to find, as they are in southern Australia, but we found out the hard way that this species is patchily distributed and uncommon, not to mention quiet and wary. However, here we have the magic birding ingredient in extreme heat: water. The birds are flocking in. This northern race of blue-faced honeyeater has a slightly longer bill than the other races and a large white underwing patch. Silver-crowned friarbird is found only in the north of Australia, but like other friarbirds, it's a noisy and aggressive honeyeater. Little friarbird lacks the usual friarbird casque, but it is just as raucous in groups. A couple of predatory butcherbirds are keeping an eye on things: silver-backed of northern Australia and the most widespread of the butcherbirds, the pied. And above them all, a raptor, the attractive and distinctive Pacific barza, the only crested hawk in Australia. Yes, this is definitely the way to bird on a sweltering day. A beautiful ground view of northern Rosella, the only Rosella with that distinctive black cap, but with the unmistakable Rosella scalloping on the mantle and back. All Rosellas have a broad diet of seeds, flowers, buds, berries, fruits and insect larvae, and feed in trees and on the ground. Pale-headed Rosella also has a white cheek patch and is found from Cape York down the east coast to northern New South Wales. Western Rosella is the smallest in the family and the only one with a yellow cheek patch. It occurs solely in the very south of Western Australia. Eastern Rosella is distributed from southern Queensland through New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. It's the original Rosella, the name being a corruption of Rose Hill where the early white settlers often saw it. They're commonly found in lightly treed country, parks and gardens, where they have an advantage over the larger crimson Rosellas with whom they share territory, in that they don't require such large nesting hollows. Green Rosella, endemic to Tasmania and with blue cheek patches, is the largest Rosella. Noisy and conspicuous in small, locally foraging flocks, it's always looked more yellow than green to us. Crimson Rosella also has a blue cheek patch, but occurs on the mainland in a similar geographical distribution to Eastern Rosella. However, there are highly variable species falling into three types: crimson, yellow and orange, with the orange type known as the Adelaide Rosella. This one is the crimson type. It's rewarding to round out our Kakadu trip with such satisfying views of the northern species of an iconic, beautiful and widespread genus of Australian birds.